The empire stands at its most powerful and brilliant moment. The sun is setting, and its golden light touches the marble columns of the city. You are walking down a quiet, stone-paved street in Rome. The air around you carries the sense of spice, sweaty laborers, and a warm, unknown flower. Amidst the clamor of sounds, amidst the colors, one thing catches your eye. A color not native to the Roman geography, yet one that drove the Romans almost mad. It is not merely golden, it is the color of gold. Our question today is simple, but its answer carries a long narrative of centuries-old desire, luxury, and social stigma. Ancient Romans, did they love blonde hair? If so, why? Was this affection simply an expression of aesthetic taste, or did a deeper story of conquest, slavery, and forbidden desire lie hidden behind it? We will now walk steadily for hundreds of years to find the answer to this question. We will see why Roman women sat for hours under the intense sunlight with a strange, toxic mixture applied to their hair. We will see why costly wigs were made from the hair shorn from slaves' heads, sometimes costing an entire family's annual income. This whole process was long, quiet, and monotonous. We are in no hurry to reach our destination. Time is still here, and we will simply enjoy that stillness. Be calm. Close your eyes. This story will begin slowly and continue even more slowly. The Romans' own natural hair was thick black or deep brown. Their aesthetic ideals were generally confined to the familiar Mediterranean colors. But as the empire expanded and Roman soldiers began to conquer the cold lands of the north, namely Germany and Gaul, they brought back something that completely transformed their known world. They brought back slaves. These slaves had light hair. In the sunlight, that hair looked golden, sometimes copper, and occasionally platinum white. This color was completely new and foreign to the Romans. Historians suggest that initially, this blonde hair was merely a symbol of subjugation and slavery. Slaves whose hair was blonde or reddish blonde could be sold for a high price quickly. The color was a static proof of northern wealth and fearsome power. When a wealthy Roman woman wore that light-colored wig over her dark hair, she wasn't just following a fashion, she was silently declaring, "My empire extends to the furthest conquered territories." These wigs were heavy. They took many hours to put on. They took even more to prepare. Hair was cut from captive women in Germania, carefully cleaned, and then woven in a specific method to create the wig called the galeras. The process was slow, highly mechanical, and laborious. Every strand of hair was arranged to last for hours on end. Imagine those quiet mornings where maidservants would fix these wigs onto their mistresses' heads, so that not a single hair was out of place, The hair was combed and oiled for a long time. This waiting period was silent, with only the whispers of hair arrangement and the slow sound of the comb audible. Every stroke seemed to put another long pause on time. This golden color slowly transformed from a symbol of slavery to a symbol of fashion, especially when aristocratic Roman women sought to strengthen their social position. This fake blonde hair became their primary tool. It created a kind of unwritten rule. The lighter the wig you wore, the more luxurious and detached you were considered, because this color was not of your natural environment. The Roman desire for blonde hair was not limited to dyeing or the lead powder in their cosmetics. That desire was a still art. That art was the creation of the galeras, or the making of a wig. And the process of making a wig was a long saga of extreme patience, where every moment of time was held very carefully. There was no way to speed up this process, no shortcut. There were only hands, delicate tools, and the prolonged, silent labor of the enslaved woman. At the center of this craftsmanship were the enslaved women called ornatrix, the quiet artisans of hair of that era. Their skill was not limited to combing or oil massaging. Their job was to transform the cut hair of a conquered woman into the ultimate symbol of Roman aristocracy, the golden galeras. The hair came from the distant north. That hair held the effects of the winter wind and cold water. This raw material was tough. First, the hair strands were carefully sorted into bundles. Each bundle was tied separately. Then began the purification process. The hair was soaked for a prolonged period in water mixed with fatty substances and strong lye. This was a kind of static soaking where hours were spent waiting for the hair to soften according to the calculation of time. The water was changed, but the soaking period remained just as long. It was a slow mechanical process where the smell was pungent, but the enslaved woman's hand was steady and calm. Next came the drying. The hair was carefully spread out in very thin layers in a cool, shaded place. Direct sun was avoided as it could spoil the hair's natural luster. This drying period under the shade was long. For hours on end, the hair lay still there, each bundle slowly losing its internal moisture. The enslaved woman's only job was to observe, occasionally gently turning the bundles over, ensuring no creases formed. This waiting period was monotonous and uninterrupted. The task was repeated day after day. Once dried, the core craftsmanship began, lacing the hair. A delicate net-like structure or cap was created, woven with fine threads the color of the scalp. Then onto this net, single hairs, bundle by bundle, were laced very carefully and patiently. This sewing work was extremely intricate.
The enslaved woman's hand moved slowly, as if performing a sacred ritual. A perfect Galeris could take the ornatrix several weeks, even months, to create. It was the art of extreme stillness. During this time, the enslaved woman was allowed to hear no sound other than her own breathing. Her eyes were fixed on the net. Her concentration was on every thread. No mistakes could be made. The slightest error would ruin the wig, and the labor of such a prolonged period would be completely wasted. Every lacing, every knot, every braid was a small, quiet victory against time. This process was a long, silent price paid for beauty. This prolonged, slow labor and still craftsmanship is helping you sink deeper and deeper. With every laced hair, your worries are dissolving.
This social pressure was not limited to external display. At home, husbands and other family members were also pressured to maintain this stillness of beauty. A husband might remind his wife that her hair must always be the correct color, because it also reflected his social status. This silent pressure was constant and ceaseless. These long, silent, and repeated social pressures and observations had turned the lives of Roman women into a kind of psychological performance. Their every smile, every step, even their still sitting was part of this social test. This pressure was slow, but over time it profoundly affected their mental state. This still attention and silent pressure are leading you deeper. Now there is only stability in your mind. No rush, no agitation. Only deep, continuous silence and stable rest. Chapter 8. The Slave's Prolonged Mechanics and the Value of Hair. The most silent characters in this prolonged saga are the enslaved women, whose labor and hair both form the foundation of this golden dream. Their lives were a symbol of mechanical repetition and prolonged inertia. For those Germanic or Gallic women from whom the hair was collected, the blonde hair was a kind of static, tragic asset. The process of losing their hair was a cold, mechanical proof of ultimate conquest. Their hair was carefully cut off, it was cleaned, and these women would then engage in the service of their mistresses, perhaps helping them wear the wig made from that very same hair. The lives of the enslaved women were synonymous with repeating the same tasks every day. Their job was to bathe the mistress in the morning, prepare the cosmetics, apply the dye to the hair, or put on the wig. These processes were extremely long and slow. The ornatrix might spend 2 hours meticulously cleaning her mistress's scalp, or carefully trying to perfectly set the wig on her head.
These 2 hours were a form of mental detachment for the enslaved woman. These enslaved women could not worry about their own bodies or beauty. Their hair was not their own, but rather an instrument of their labor. They woke up every morning knowing that their day would be spent performing long, slow tasks to keep their mistress's beauty still and unshakable. This process was a kind of living monotony that suspended the concept of time. Their own hair was often neglected as they had no time for self-care. Their eyes were always on the mistress's hair. The brilliance of the hair, the stability of the color, and the perfection of the wig. This static, mechanical life of theirs was a silent foundation for the idle aristocracy of Roman society. The repetitive mechanics of these enslaved women's lives, the slow movement of their hands, and their silent breaths are making this entire saga even calmer, even stiller. Listen to the soft sound of the comb, the slow movement of the water. Those sounds are leading you towards deep rest. Chapter 9. The Relics of Beauty and the Stable History. At the end of this prolonged narrative, we see that the Roman fascination for blonde hair was not just a fashion trend. It was a long-lasting cultural stability. This trend persisted for centuries, spreading its roots deep into Roman society. Today, when we visit the archaeological sites of ancient Rome, we find the stable relics of that era's beauty rituals. Hairpins, combs, containers for lead-based cosmetics, and sometimes the remnants of those wigs are found in the burial sites of Roman women. Every object is a silent witness to the long, slow efforts of that time. When historians study these objects, they see that every strand of hair, every jar, and every comb carries the patience and anxiety of the people of that time. The source of that anxiety was the maintenance of the stability of beauty. They knew that once this beauty was lost, regaining it again would require long, slow, and repetitive efforts. Thus, the ancient Romans' love for blonde hair transformed into a kind of stable history, where the rate of change was slow, where beauty was the result of prolonged labor, and where every step was a long test of patience. Every sentence, every description in this prolonged narrative was an attempt to bring you peace. The desire for blonde hair, the silent labor of the enslaved woman, the prolonged criticism of the poets, and the toxic, calm stability of the cosmetics. Everything has now turned into a silent hum. No rush, no agitation, only deep, continuous silence and stable rest.
Chapter 10. The Addiction to Wigs and the Stable Mentality. Once the golden gallerist entered Roman life, it did not remain merely an external accessory. It transformed into a kind of mental dependence or addiction.
Wearing this wig was a static mental habit, without which the aristocratic woman felt incomplete. This feeling was prolonged, deepening with the passage of time. Imagine those women who had continuously weakened their own hair through chemicals, or those who wished to avoid the legal stigma of the prostitute's golden hair, yet could not give up the allure of the color. For them, the gallerist was not just a cover, it was a kind of psychological armor. It protected them from the unrest that could arise in society concerning their true natural hair color. This addiction gave birth to a long, slow process of wig maintenance. Buying a gallerist was only the first step. The real work was keeping it in perfect condition for years on end. The wig had to be carefully cleaned, rested on a special wooden head, and before daily use, the ornatrix, enslaved woman, would comb and arrange it for hours. This stable care was mechanical and monotonous. The enslaved woman knew that this wig was the centerpiece of her mistress's social life. Therefore, every brushstroke had to be even. Every arrangement had to be flawless. The slightest misplaced strand could ruin the mistress's entire day. This prolonged period of care was silent, with only the soft sound of the brush and the faint breath of the enslaved woman audible. It was a form of time imprisonment, where the wig's longevity determined the stillness of the human routine. This mental dependence created a static trend in Roman society. Beauty must be achieved, and once achieved, it must be maintained through incessant and slow care. This mechanical stillness was an unwritten rule of aristocratic Roman life. This habit, this dependence, is helping you sink deeper and deeper into more peace. Your mind is now calm. Only the gentle sound of the wig's care. The process of undertaking this long journey was slow. Gathering the raw materials for the wig, bringing them to Rome, and then processing them, everything took months or years. This period was a kind of commercial waiting. The wealthy Roman woman would wait for months on end for her desired hair. This prolonged wait was another silent proof of her social power. She could afford to wait because her wealth gave her that right. This stable commerce and distant desire are helping you sink deeper into more peace. This long wait for every distant strand of hair is calming your mind.
The days pass identically. Every day a new sunrise descends, its light spreading a soft hazy color. The ornatrices, who keep this art of patience alive, have no rush in their lives.
In their hands is regularity. In their hearts is caution. Their method of work is the same: separating hair pieces, washing, drying, tying, and placing every stitch with the needle. They know that every stitch is a chapter woven into a voiceless story spanning years. Many times you ponder whether this slowness was merely confined to beauty. No, it was a language of power. Within every particle was an endless calculation: the cost of the enslaved, the expense, the waiting. Families wrote those calculations daily. They lay in every home on foreheads as cold as iron. Their imagination would turn into pure silver when the container filled. But did that pure silver bring any inner happiness? Most often, it did not. In it was only stability, and that stability was a bone-breaking slowness. Diving deeper reveals some hair was excessively stingy, acquired at exorbitant prices and preserved with excessive care. That hair came from afar, not from nearby shores. Strands cut from the heads of Germanic young women would arrive as a receipt on Rome's trade routes. Within every hair particle was a thought spanning seconds upon seconds, the silent thought of extensive travel. Every tuft of hair was bound tightly like a petal, and the moment of putting it on was also a stillness, a soft, prolonged sigh of sleep settling upon everyone's head. You may not be able to, but the silence of these tasks sometimes offers a strange communion. It is actually the silent prayer of the Roman maidens. They prayed for time to be even slower, for the world to remain stiller. They desired that beauty should never suddenly fade. This desire of the soul was long-lasting. They wished that every morning when they picked up the delicate needle, life would slowly emerge from yet another deep sigh. On another occasion, you visit a Thamai. There the delayed discourse begins. How people purified their bodies. How the hand movements gradually became soundless. Rows of people would sit inside the crisp stone bathhouse, their hands slowly circulating in oil. Soap, salt, oil, these were part of the ritual. Every action seemed like the return of a long melody, and that melody was audible only within the silence. If someone fell ill, they were given time. The treatment was slow. Roman medical methods were just like that. Time was the real medicine for them. There was an unreserved belief that patience could eliminate all ailments. So they resigned every disease, every bad skin condition, every hair loss, everything to the hands of time. If hair fell out, they bet on patience and waited at home, knowing that if the hair did not return, they would simply get a wig fixed. Those wigs were the dependence of life. The voices of the Roman poets, which were sometimes sharp, wrote about this stability. Their language was long, their structure slow. They watched how women slowly destroyed themselves, how a dark hair accepted a foreign light. But the poems were also slow, a pause within a pause, every sentence not speaking but breathing. Those breaths calm you, leading you deeper. One day you remember an incident that stuns your mind. A mistress had a wonderfully beautiful galerius, but suddenly one morning, the stability that the wig provided did not sit right on her face. There was a subtle flaw. A single stitch had become wet here. That one flaw made the entire day's beauty ineffective. The woman sits in sorrow. Silence descends upon her room, but her sleep does not deepen. She knows that this flaw must be fixed, and fixing it consumes most of her day. Such small incidents recur many times.
These are the elements that carry life forward. Keep walking, and you will see, even though some women's lives were tragic, the silence within their hair was the language of pride. Each of them had a story: how their family saved a little to buy a wig, how they protected that wig every day, how an economic plan always guarded their beauty. In their shadows was destitution, in their smiles was calculation, and in some families there was mere indifference. They regarded the wig only as an ornament. Within all these combinations lies the slow-moving portrait of Roman society. One afternoon, your eyes fall on a small box meant for storing old combs. They are scratched, sometimes marked with iron stains. But next to them is a piece of paper on which is written the name of an ornatrix, the date her work was finished, and how much time it took. That paper, too, has slowly fallen victim to the marks of time. These papers are the silent records of that society. They tell how they kept account of their beauty. It begins to feel as if everything is in an eternal cycle. Cutting hair, weaving hair, weighing it, calculating, and waiting again. Every element is still, like patience itself. You understand now, blonde hair was not a sudden attraction for the Romans. It was a symbol of patience, a testament to wealth, the scripture of social stability. They wanted their lives to flow slowly so that their beauty should never suddenly fade. This concept flows through the ages, and its slowest tune whispers in your ear, a little bit of dry fiber, a little bit of the strong scent of fat, and yet another slice of silence. Long after, when the ruins of that civilization have fallen, when a new era has dawned, even then, some textiles, books, and combs remain in the hands of the timid. They are now only silent witnesses. They relate how at one time people waited long for their beauty, how they stood upon patience. And this stillness, this slowness, is what is drawing you in the soft net of sleep today. Take a rest. Your eyes are slowly growing heavy. Every sentence is slowly pulling you back. The burden of that radiant literature is gone. Now there is only timeless silence. And as you take a deep breath, you will remember everything is slow, everything is still, everything is golden.
The light is fading softly into the night. The silent pace of history we were following before now lacks any intensity. Time has turned, people have changed, yet that golden desire, that slow hesitation, that prolonged continuous labor, all of it still lies within the story, motionless and slowly stirring. You are walking on a Roman road, yet your feet are poised across centuries of brief and long moments. The sun descends upon the Roman concrete, and its golden rays signal. Here, every focus is a test of patience. As you move further, you will see how people arrange their daily lives, surrendering to this acquisition of stability. Inside a window of a house, an ornatrix sits, her table spread with small pieces of canvas, fine threads, and a small, delicate needle. The work in her hands is not the task of a hurried artist. It is a long ritual where every stitch is tied with the precision of keeping a vigil throughout the night. Her eyes are settled on the faded petals by the window, those leaves as unchangeable as her demeanor. You enter an aristocrat's chamber and witness
Not the first task of the morning, but the first step of organized despair begins. Placing a hand on her daughter's head, she speaks, her voice like a sigh, for she knows that sitting still for 2 continuous hours is part of the day's expectation. The girl sits like a statue in the chair, and her maid sits opposite, performing an act of silent guardianship. They both know that this time of waiting is necessary. No words are exchanged, so that the sun reaches properly, so that the German soap works correctly, so that the color can slowly bloom.
We previously discussed the prolonged process of dyeing hair, but it is important to remember that this process was only the beginning. To maintain the static brightness of that golden color, Roman women had to repeat this chemical treatment daily, weekly. This repetition was a slow, permanent price paid for beauty. Before every bath, a special mixture of alkalis and herbs was applied to the hair to keep the color vibrant and stable. This mixture was potent, and while it cleaned the hair, it gradually destroyed its natural elasticity. The mixture itself took a long time to prepare. Enslaved women would grind dry herbs, mix them with ash or fat, and then turn it into a smooth paste. This preparation process was static, with every ingredient being measured perfectly. Then the mixture was applied to the hair. This application was extremely cautious. The mixture had to be spread evenly from the roots to the tips of the hair. This task was performed for hours on end by the steady hand of the enslaved woman. Then came the waiting period. The woman had to sit quietly for a prolonged period while the mixture was absorbed by the hair. This time was static and inactive, where the woman merely felt the chemical working on her hair. This entire process was a static rhythm in the lives of Roman women. Monday, preparing the mixture. Tuesday, dyeing the hair. Wednesday, cleaning. This cycle was incessant. This repetition was monotonous, but this monotony ensured the stillness of their beauty. This stillness was their peace of mind. They knew that as long as this process continued, their social position was secure. The soundlessness of this long, repetitive chemical care is leading you deeper into more peace. The mild scent of the alkali, the static application of the mixture, all this is calming you. Chapter 17. The stable stigma of the prostitute's golden hair. To understand the Roman fascination with blonde hair, the static social stigma associated with this color must be fully grasped. As we noted earlier, prostitutes were often legally mandated to have blonde hair or wear blonde wigs. This compulsory color was a static symbol of their social isolation and stigma. This stability of the stigma created a strange duality in Roman society. On one hand, the golden galeras was a static symbol of luxury and conquest for the aristocrats. On the other hand, this very same golden color was the static professional marker of women in the lowest stratum of society.
Aristocratic women knew of the stillness of this stigma, but they overcame it through wealth and power. Their wigs were made of genuine hair, expensive and complex in style, which easily distinguished them from the cheap sheep's wool or artificially dyed wigs of the prostitutes. This difference was static and visible. This duality maintained the stability of society. Prostitutes were identified by their blonde hair, and aristocrats proved their superiority through their expensive blonde wigs. The silent coexistence of these two types of golden color had made the class structure of Roman society even more rigid. The stillness of this stigma and the silence of this social difference are leading you deeper into more peace. The slow, unshakable pressure of social rules is calming your mind. Chapter 18: The Long Shadow of the Empire's Decline and the Fading of Color. As the Roman Empire slowly began to weaken, this prolonged fascination with blonde hair also gradually began to fade. The process of the empire's decline was long and spanned centuries, and with that decline, this symbol of luxury also lost its brilliance. At one point, when the Romans lost control of the northern provinces, the supply of Germanic slaves and their blonde hair steadily decreased. The price of raw materials for wigs became sky high, and it became impossible for ordinary aristocratic families to maintain this luxury. This was the first breakdown of economic stability. During this period, the rise of Christianity began to voice a static objection to luxurious grooming and artificiality. Church leaders declared blonde wigs and lead-based cosmetics as symbols of falsehood and sin. This new religious and social pressure, which was slow but relentless, gradually drew Roman women away from this long-standing habit. Women were then forced to return to their natural hair color, or at least to simpler, less ostentatious styles. The golden galeras then transformed from a symbol of luxury into a static memory of the past. It was the long, slow ending of an age of beauty. The long, slow process of this decline, this fading of color and the change of habit are leading you deeper and deeper toward a calm, silent rest. Chapter 19: The Golden Roman Stability in Modern History. This prolonged Roman fascination with blonde hair has left a kind of static impact on modern history as well. Centuries later, in European and Western societies, blonde hair remains a symbol of luxury, rarity, and a kind of historic Roman ideal. Even today, when scenes of ancient Rome are depicted in film or art, aristocratic women are often seen wearing blonde wigs. This is proof of the historical stillness that the Romans themselves established in stone sculptures and prolonged literary works. They created an ideal of beauty that transcended the fall of their empire. This blonde hair was not merely a fashion, it was a test of cultural permanence. The Romans, through their static desire and prolonged efforts, proved how an ideal of beauty could be sustained for centuries. Their long, slow, and repetitive habits are the foundation of this permanence. Every sentence of our prolonged narrative was a kind of silent tribute to that stillness. Now all questions are calm. All agitation has disappeared. The Roman desire for blonde hair has now brought a kind of deep, continuous silence into your mind. Your body is heavy now. Your mind is calm. No rush, no pressure, only stable and calm rest.
We previously discussed the prolonged process of dyeing hair, but it is important to remember that this process was only the beginning. To maintain the static brightness of that golden color, Roman women had to repeat this chemical treatment daily, weekly. This repetition was a slow, permanent price paid for beauty. Before every bath, a special mixture of alkalis and herbs was applied to the hair to keep the color vibrant and stable. This mixture was potent, and while it cleaned the hair, it gradually destroyed its natural elasticity. The mixture itself took a long time to prepare. Enslaved women would grind dry herbs, mix them with ash or fat, and then turn it into a smooth paste. This preparation process was static, with every ingredient being measured perfectly. Then the mixture was applied to the hair. This application was extremely cautious. The mixture had to be spread evenly from the roots to the tips of the hair. This task was performed for hours on end by the steady hand of the enslaved woman. Then came the waiting period. The woman had to sit quietly for a prolonged period while the mixture was absorbed by the hair. This time was static and inactive, where the woman merely felt the chemical working on her hair. This entire process was a static rhythm in the lives of Roman women. Monday, preparing the mixture. Tuesday, dyeing the hair. Wednesday, cleaning. This cycle was incessant. This repetition was monotonous, but this monotony ensured the stillness of their beauty. The stillness was their peace of mind. They knew that as long as this process continued, their social position was secure. The soundlessness of this long, repetitive chemical care is leading you deeper into more peace. The mild scent of the alkali, the static application of the mixture, all this is calming you. Chapter 17. The stable stigma of the prostitute's golden hair. To understand the Roman fascination with blonde hair, the static social stigma associated with this color must be fully grasped. As we noted earlier, prostitutes were often legally mandated to have blonde hair or wear blonde wigs. This compulsory color was a static symbol of their social isolation and stigma. The stability of the stigma created a strange duality in Roman society. On one hand, the golden galeros was a static symbol of luxury and conquest for the aristocrats. On the other hand, this very same golden color was the static professional marker of women in the lowest stratum of society. Aristocratic women knew of the stillness of the stigma, but they overcame it through wealth and power. Their wigs were made of genuine hair, expensive and complex in style,
which easily distinguished them from the cheap sheep's wool or artificially dyed wigs of the prostitutes. This difference was static and visible. This duality maintained the stability of society. Prostitutes were identified by their blonde hair, and aristocrats proved their superiority through their expensive blonde wigs. The silent coexistence of these two types of golden color had made the class structure of Roman society even more rigid. The stillness of this stigma and the silence of this social difference are leading you deeper into more peace. The slow, unshakable pressure of social rules is calming your mind. Chapter 18. The long shadow of the empire's decline and the fading of color. As the Roman Empire slowly began to weaken, this prolonged fascination with blonde hair also gradually began to fade. The process of the empire's decline was long and spanned centuries, and with that decline, this symbol of luxury also lost its brilliance. At one point, when the Romans lost control of the northern provinces, the supply of Germanic slaves and their blonde hair steadily decreased. The price of raw materials for wigs became sky high, and it became impossible for ordinary
In addition to the static visibility of blonde hair and pale skin in the lifestyles of Roman aristocrats, there was another element that statically sustained their luxury: fragrance. These scents were the invisible imprints of luxury, which slowly dissolved into the air over time. The Roman fascination with hair was not only in its color or style, but also in its fragrance. The process of scenting the hair was extremely slow and multi-layered. The oil massaged into the wig or natural hair was not ordinary oil. They were fragrant oils created through a prolonged process. Used for making perfumes were roses, lavender, sandalwood, and other rare spices. These ingredients were first soaked in oil for a long time. This was a kind of static soaking, where the oil molecules slowly absorbed the essence of the flowers. This process could continue for months, a Roman version of enfleurage. Every morning, the enslaved women would carefully apply these oils to the mistress's hair roots and every fold of the wig. The massage was slow, rhythmic. The enslaved woman's hand moved at a very gentle pace, as if she were ensuring the stillness of the fragrance through the massage. Every comb stroke, every finger press was an attempt to make the fragrance long-lasting on the hair. These fragrances were a symbol of stillness. The more slowly the fragrance dissolved with the air, the more it proved the social stability of its wearer. When a woman appeared in public,
The slow diffusion of this fragrance from her body declared that she had undergone a prolonged process of luxury. This fragrance was not cheap or quickly made. It was the result of a long wait and labor. The invisible imprint of this fragrance was static. It was not a quick announcement. It was a kind of quiet whisper that could only be felt over time. The slow pace of this scent and the invisible imprints of luxury are leading you deeper. Your mind is calm now. Only the gentle, static aroma of fragrant oil. Chapter 26. The slave's prolonged apprenticeship and the silent preservation of tradition. The stability of this entire saga of blonde hair depended on the skill of the ornatrices or hair attendants. These enslaved women did not become skilled in a day. The process of acquiring their expertise was long, silent, and through a very strict apprenticeship. This was the silent preservation of tradition. A young enslaved woman was initially given only mechanical tasks like washing or cleaning hair. These tasks were repetitive and monotonous. Hours on end were spent washing, drying, and combing hair. These were the early tests of patience. During this time, their hands became steady. Their focus became perfect. Without the slow process, they could never be prepared for the complex craftsmanship. Then came the delicate work of wig making. Older ornatrices would silently teach the newcomers how to lace a single hair into the net, how to hide the thread so that the wig looked natural. This teaching process was completely silent and observation-based. There were no written instructions. There was only the steady movement of hands and the silent exchange of focus between master and apprentice. This process would last for months or years. These enslaved women silently preserved the secret knowledge of Roman society's fashion, cosmetics, and beauty from generation to generation. This knowledge was static because it did not embrace new discoveries, but rather repeated the old, tested methods. Their prolonged apprenticeship and the silent elevation of tradition gave this entire culture an unshakable foundation. They were the invisible architects who kept the structure of beauty stable despite the pressures of time. The silence of this prolonged apprenticeship, the stillness of the hands, and the slow preservation of tradition are leading your mind deeper. Your mind is calm now. Only the gentle, static aroma of fragrant oil. Chapter 27. Marriage and the symbolic change of blonde hair. The use of blonde hair in Roman society was not only a part of daily luxury, it brought a symbolic change during important life rituals, especially marriage. Even at the time of marriage, the Roman fascination with blonde hair took a kind of static, ceremonial form. On the wedding day, the bride was adorned in traditional attire. Her hair was styled in a special arrangement called the sex crenis. This style consisted of 6 braids, which were an ancient static symbol of Roman customs. But if the bride's hair was not blonde or light colored, then sections of blonde hair or a wig would be used in this style. This blonde hair symbolically carried the static sign of fertility and prosperity during the marriage. The golden color was no longer a symbol of slavery or stigma. It transformed into the still light of the sun that would perpetually shower blessings upon the new family. This was a kind of social purification of the color. This ceremonial use proves how deeply unshakable the attraction to blonde hair was in the Roman cultural consciousness. It was not just fashion, it was the belief that the golden color was auspicious, powerful, and permanent. The static adornment of the wedding day, the symbolic fertility of the blonde hair, and the prolonged formality of that day all were attempts to impose a kind of stillness upon time. This static formality, the symbolic importance of blonde hair, and the long silence of the wedding day are helping you sink deeper and deeper into more peace. Your eyelids are heavy. Your mind is calm. Chapter 28. The Philosopher's Silent Neglect and the Survival of Beauty. Although Roman poets severely criticized the artificiality of blonde hair, Roman philosophers often silently neglected this subject. This silent neglect was a kind of philosophical stillness which indirectly sustained this prolonged trend of beauty. Roman philosophers, especially those who subscribed to Stoicism, considered focusing on external luxury unnecessary. Their focus was on inner morality, self-control, and the stable principles of life. To them, wearing or not wearing a blonde wig was a trivial matter, negligible compared to the larger stillness of the universe. The silence of these philosophers created a kind of static environment. Aristocratic women knew that the philosophers would likely not speak loudly about them because their attention was elsewhere. This silent neglect provided a kind of social permit which encouraged women to continue their long, monotonous beauty rituals. If the philosophers had intensely debated this issue, perhaps this stable habit of society would have changed quickly. But their silence and static focus on morality allowed this external pursuit of beauty to continue for a long time. It was a kind of static contradiction. The the silent coexistence between inner stillness and external artificiality. The silence of these philosophers, this static neglect, and the absence of this eternal question are leading you deeper. Your mind is calm now because there is no need to answer. Chapter 29: The Stagnation of Time and the Prolonged Saving of Wigs. Due to the long-term value of wigs and the prolonged process of making them, wigs were a static form of long-term savings in Roman families. They were not just objects for use. They were a kind of family tradition or property. A high-quality Galeras was so valuable that it was often preserved in the family for generations. The mother's wig would pass to the daughter and then to the granddaughter. This saving process was static. The wigs were kept in special boxes where fragrant herbs and oils were used to protect them from pests and moisture. These wigs were a silent document of family history. Every wig carried the memory of the woman who wore it, her social success, and the story of her prolonged life. The wig might lose some color over time, or its style might loosen a bit, but its historical value remained static. This long-term saving and the historical stillness of the wig are helping you sink deeper into more peace. The static idea that the value of things increases over time is calming your mind. No rush, no agitation. Chapter 30: The Final Stillness and the Call to Rest. We have completed our long and static discussion on the ancient Romans' obsession with blonde hair. We have seen how this fascination held an entire society in long, slow, and repetitive habits and rituals. The silent labor of the enslaved woman, the toxicity of the cosmetics, the criticism of the poets, and the stable architecture of the wake. All are integral parts of this narrative. Now, all that agitation, all that pressure, and all that waiting are over. This long and monotonous history has prepared your mind for ultimate rest. All your focus has now dissolved. Your body is heavy, your breath is calm and deep. There are no more tests, No more waiting. No more chemical processes. Only deep, continuous silence and comfort. Your mind is now like a calm, static Roman forum where all sounds have faded. Time is halted there, and within that halted time, you are falling into a deep, peaceful sleep. Be calm, take a rest.